Saks Off Fifth, up to 70% off every day. Spring is in full swing here at Saks Off Fifth, with so many exciting trends to try. From matching sets and floral dresses to wide-leg jeans and chic accessories, find all of the season's must-have styles. Plus, shop new designer arrivals weekly. Find Gucci, Valentino Garavani, Versace, Stuart Weitzman, and more. Head to SaksOffFifth.com or a Saks Off Fifth store near you for up to 70% off every day.
Oh, Typology friends, today is the day. May I introduce to you one of my oldest and dearest friends of all time. Therapist, pastor, Enneagram 2 with a 3-wing, my confrere, my partner in crime, Michael Cusick. Michael, welcome to Typology.
Thank you. I think I'm blushing.
Oh, I just thought maybe you had high blood pressure.
or rosacea, which I do.
Michael, we're going to be talking about what life is like as an Enneagram 2, but more importantly, we're going to be talking about your new book, Sacred Attachment, Escaping Spiritual Exhaustion and Trusting in Divine Love. I'm stoked because I have heard you teach this material numerous times. I know how expert you are at unpacking difficult ideas, making them accessible and real for people, particularly when we start getting into the realm of attachment theory. And I cannot wait for our folks to hear it. Actually, I can't wait for Anthony to hear it because he has a lot of problems. And I'm trying to fix him in a very sideways fashion by having you on the show. Oh, stop your crying, Anthony.
That's why I wore this, Michael. I can't see it, but I'm wiping my tears with my handkerchief that I have around my neck.
There it is. He's now carrying a handkerchief. He's an Enneagram 4. He's an Enneagram 4 who's always walking around with a handkerchief to blot his tears.
Yeah. What's the French word for tie?
Cravat.
Cravat. Yes. It's my little cravat.
Oh my gosh.
Michael, I am not responsible right now for this digression, which is going off the rails.
Well, I'll also say I'm going to give a commercial because y'all have a long history, but I got to spend a week all by myself with Cusick up in Denver, and it was really a significant week for me. And I think you moved from 2 to that 4 in growth very, very well.
Oh, look at that. He goes to the high side of 4. He's actually in health. But here's the other thing. What you're talking about, Anthony, is the Restoring the Soul intensives that Michael and his team do, which I have countless examples of people that I have sent there and of people who have reported back to me personally the amazing work that Michael and the team do. Also, for people to know about the Restoring the Soul Men's Weekend that I have done with Michael, that is, if you go to their website, Restoring the Soul, you can learn about it. I have done 3 of them. I'm one of, I guess, 12 or 13 therapists that are working in groups with guys, and I try never to miss them because I enjoy them and participating in them so much. Okay, moving on, because Michael's head is swelling beyond the frame on the camera. So I don't want to go any further. Michael, Enneagram 2. I heard the other day someone say something that made me laugh out loud. They said their definition of codependency was lighting yourself on fire so you can warm other people.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's so accurate because, we all have some image, whether from a movie or something, of self-immolation, of lighting yourself on fire, and you don't survive that. It's very, very rare. And so as a 2, I not just have wrestled, but I wrestle with and struggle with codependency. And when I really find myself caught in it, it is like lighting myself on fire. On the outside of it, when I realize I'm stuck in that, I'm like, why did I do that? And it's painful. It works until it doesn't work.
Yeah. So when you say, why did I do that? What are you referring to? What behavior specifically?
Two sides of a coin. One side is something in me that can compulsively people please and serve and help and give in a way that most frequently looks like saying yes instead of no. And I'm not just talking about speaking commitments and things like that, but saying yes instead of no to family, to my spouse, Julianne. I'm not talking about like, would you go to the refrigerator and get the ketchup, because we forgot to put that on the table, but places where it's just easier to conform and to perform instead of have a sense of self. And I have grown in that, but it's really freeing to be 60 and to say, I'm a therapist, I've done a lot of therapy, and this is an area that I still have to grow in. And a plug for your book and the 12 steps. The thing that's helped me more than anything else with this is doing recovery work, where every day, I've got to be in that place of saying, I'm powerless over this. When I indulge it, my life becomes unmanageable, complicated, painful, all bad stuff. And so, God, I'm going to offer myself to you, believing that only you can make me whole and free.
Mm-hmm. What's the core wound there, Michael? Like, what do you think the core wound for twos is?
I think the core wound is a sense of, and I'm not just borrowing this from the literature, but a sense of pride, which I define as self-sufficiency. We've had a lot of bogus definitions about humility on one side and pride on the other. Humility is not that I need to think less of myself or think of myself less. It's that I need to think of myself accurately. And you're familiar with the quote from Thomas Merton where he said that humility is being precisely who you are at any given moment before God and maybe one other person. I'm paraphrasing that. So pride is not I'm puffed up, I'm arrogant, I'm conceited. Pride is self-sufficiency, which says I basically don't need you in any way, shape, or form, other person, to meet my needs. And
that does describe twos pretty well. Like, so we would say that the pride piece for twos is specifically their belief that they are so attuned to your feelings that they know what you need before you do. They assume that others are more needy than they are, and that they themselves don't have needs, right? And therefore, that's a form of self-sufficiency. And humility is really saying, I give up because I do not have all the time, treasure, talent, and resources in the world to meet everybody else's needs, while at the same time disavowing or not acknowledging my own. So on the journey toward being able to articulate your own needs, which is a struggle for twos, where are you on that?
Recently I've probably been, if 10 is high, I've been as low as a 2 or 3. And thankfully in our friendship, I've called you, or we've FaceTimed, or we've gotten together face to face and talked about that. Because, somebody once said, a famous Christian author said that most of us have very little idea how long it takes to get this sense of belovedness deep down inside of us. And for me, it's taken a really long time. And it can't happen through information. Information doesn't lead to transformation. You need encounter, you need experience, which, thank you for your comments about the men's weekend that we do. It's one of the highlights of my year because I get to do that with you. But we need experience, we need encounter, and that's what leads to real transformation. And so the more encounter I have, the more I'm beginning to trust. And that's part of why I wrote the book, Sacred Attachment, is that you can't have attachment without a sense of embodied trust. And based on my particular story, I didn't get that.
Yeah. So sacred attachment, escaping spiritual exhaustion and trusting in divine love. I endorsed the book. I loved the book. I've seen the book, lived out in your life, but also as you present it to other people, how it explores trauma and shame and spiritual burnout and how those can stand in the way of our relationship with God. And how do you define sacred attachment? And then what kind of like moved you to explore this concept in writing?
Well, let me answer the first question first and the second question last. How do I define sacred attachment?
Michael, by the way, that is usually how it goes, right? You in a linear fashion. I know that for you, that may be a new concept, but I just would like to point that out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So let me share the first thing seventh and the second thing fourth. You caught me on that. That was funny. And I'm not blushing. There would have been a day where I would have been terribly ashamed, but I love you. And that's what we do with one another. So I've told you the story, but I wanted to name the book at one point, Love Has You. And the story for that is when I released Surfing for God, my first book in 2012, I sent a copy to Richard Rohr, who had really influenced me. He was kind enough to write me back in this beautiful little note. And the sign off, where we say sincerely yours or best or cheers, he said, Love has you, comma, Richard. And it was one of the most prized possessions that I have, just that little note for him. Since found that he writes dozens of notes to people around the world every day. He's just got this beautiful calling to do that, to encourage, and it doesn't lessen the one that he wrote me. As soon as I read those words, 3 words, Love Has You, I said, that's the name of a book that I'm going to write. And then it took me several years to figure out what that book was. But I wrote the book because I needed to create a language and a lens for what I had experienced in my own life. I don't like the word deconstruction of faith because I believe that what people speak of when they're speaking about deconstruction is actually a growth spurt. It's getting rid of baggage that we've carried. It's moving like a child before puberty and someone after puberty. It's moving into a new stage of being where new opportunities are there and where you're actually growing up. And there are some people that have, quote, lost their faith, but I would argue that even that is a kind of growth spurt or transition, and that it's not necessarily a net loss. So having said that, this language and this lens is around the language of the heart and a lens of attachment, which is really rooted in human longing. And what the whole book revolves around, other than attachment, is this idea of a gap, or the word I've given it is delta. That, right now, there's many, many people that are wounded by the church. There's many, many people who are just tired of the kind of faith experience in the Christian tradition that's been presented. And one way or another, there's this gap between what they believe and what they experience, or a gap between what they were told this life would look like, happy, clappy, love, joy, peace, abundance, but then their inner reality, which, as you know, my life for so long, when I was in Young Life, when I was a youth minister through college, nobody knew anything about my story of addiction, abuse, shame, trauma. I was walking around with anxiety, procrastination, depression, undiagnosed bipolar. And on the outside yet, I was this religious performer who looked really, really, really good. So this gap in science, the Greek letter is delta, and it represents the distance between those two. But then a delta is also the delta of a river, like the delta of the Mississippi. And it's where two seemingly distinct things like fresh water and salt water become one brand new substance. So in this gap, if we understand this idea of attachment and understand that love has us, which was at one time the book title, that we can actually experience that second kind of delta where these dualities or disparities actually come together and create something brand new that is actually the life that we long for.
Yeah, and so let's talk about attachment theory for a second, because obviously this plays a major role in the book, right? Yeah. And I've seen you present this many, many times. Can you explain the 4 S's and that framework and its significance in spiritual healing?
Yeah, as I do that, if you'll indulge me, I want to talk about the difference between attachment style and attachment process. Those are 2 very different things. And really, to talk about these 4 S's of seen, soothe, safe, secure, it's important to talk about the attachment process. So on social media and in popular books, people read about attachment style. I either have a secure attachment, which approximately 60% of Americans have. I think that's high. And then insecure attachment is avoidant, where I check out, I withdraw, I shut down from relational opportunities and bids for connection. And then there's anxious attachment, where I ramp up, I dial up my attempts like a codependent, like I described earlier, to secure the relationship with other people. And oftentimes that can be high levels of neediness, clinging in relationship, and certainly a performance orientation. And then there's ambivalent, which is a combination of the both. And sometimes people will use a category of disorganized. Popularly, that's what we understand attachment to be. And you can have that or not have a secure attachment. The attachment process is something that happens from womb to tomb, from birth to death. But there's this key period from 0 to 4, and then to expand that from 0 to 26 when the human brain is just about done developing. And this process is something that happens and begins with the infant, between the infant and the parent. And it's how we organize the world around us and how we regulate ourselves, especially in relation to other people. So if I am attended to and a parent comes and they engage with me in these ways that I'll talk about of seen, soothed, safe, secure, I have the ability to understand that when I'm hungry, parent comes and picks me up and they present to me the nourishment that I need. That when I'm cold or I have a wet diaper, that child, they don't have the cognitive capacity or construct for this yet, but it's as if they would say, when I'm uncomfortable, when I'm wet, when I'm in pain, that love, care, this parent who's stronger than me comes to me and attends to me. And by that, I can begin to see cause and effect and relationships in the world. The other side of this is that it's a process by which I learn to regulate myself. But the infant and the child cannot do this by themselves. It actually requires the responsiveness and the engagement of the caregiver to come to the child so that attending and gazing in the eye, literally and physically, allows the nervous system to develop and literally allows about 50% of the neurons in the brain to come online so that child can then do two things. Number one, begin to trust that soothing and care is there, that comfort is there, and they can calm themselves. And number two, to begin to self-soothe. To begin to self-soothe through having a stuffed animal in the crib, or by patting their hand up and down, or by rolling into a more comfortable position. And as that child gets older, that self-soothing, if it's healthy, might look like playing with a stuffed animal, and that leads to a sense of joy and calm as opposed to dissociation, where they're off in their room doing that because no one's around. So that process is just absolutely essential. And then the 4 S's are ways of thinking about that attunement and the way that the caregiver relates.
Great.
Does this podcast make you happy? Of course it does. That's why you're here. But it only comes out once a week. For happiness every night, you need Adam and Eve. Yes, I'm talking about sex toys. It's cool. It's cool. You have earbuds in, right? Adam and Eve, America's most trusted source for adult products, has been making people very happy for over 50 years. With thousands of toys for both men and women. Just go to adamandeve.com now and enter code IHEART for 50% off almost any one item, plus free discreet shipping. That's adamandeve.com, code IHEART for 50% off.
Since its invention, the TV has been just that, a TV. But what if it could be something more? Meet Samsung Vision AI. It makes your old favorites look picture perfect with AI upscaling for optimal clarity. Watching the game with a bilingual crowd? Your TV can translate English broadcast subtitles to Spanish live. Or maybe you're watching Samsung TV Plus and you're wondering who that actor is. Samsung Vision AI already knows and even recommends you more content to watch. With Samsung Vision AI, you get more from your TV than you ever thought possible. It starts to make you question, can you even call it a TV at all? Experience Samsung Vision AI today and get a music frame on Samsung with a qualifying 2025 TV and audio purchase. Visit Samsung.com to learn more. Valid 4/16 to 5/4 on qualifying 2025 Neo QLED OLED and the frame TVs with Vision AI while supplies last. See Samsung.com for terms and conditions. Vision AI features vary by model. Upscaling utilizes AI-based formulas and results may vary based on source content. Translation accuracy not guaranteed. Click to search is on certain models only.
So what to me is the magic message of the book is that all of us have these different styles, if you will, one of which we probably favor over the others, right? But you're now talking about how do we formulate or form a secure attachment to God? So it's not just between human beings, right? It's like the whole idea that attachment has so much to do with our spiritual life, I think, is just revolutionary. Unpack it.
Yeah, and although I've written about this idea, Kurt Thompson is one person who's written about this. Not Crispin Glover, Crispin Mayfield. Crispin Glover was in Back to the Future. Biff, get your damn hands off me. McFly, I'm going to get... Crispin Mayfield wrote a wonderful book called Attached to God, which I go in a different direction, but it inspired me to begin to think about this. So I'll borrow from our friend Kurt Thompson. He said in his book, Anatomy of the Soul, that God inherits all the same neural networks that are inside of us as any of the people that we're in relationship to. So how we relate to others is how we are going to relate to God, which is why it's so important to do the emotional work and to go below the surface of the Enneagram numbers, which is why I've loved your show and your approach from day one, is that you have some interest, but not ultimate interest in helping people to just know their number. But how can you use this for growth? How can you see this as a spiritual tool? And in some ways, the Enneagram is, as we look at the wound side of things, as well as the gift, it's a way of understanding where we did or didn't get our needs met. And that's fundamentally what attachment is about. So I came to God at 16 years old when I had my first, conscious act of faith, as opposed to being an infant, where I heard for the first time, that there was good news out there and that the creator of the universe actually saw me and loved me. I didn't believe for a long time that he liked me, but I came to accept that he loved me. And the reason why I struggled for so long to have any kind of internal experience was because I was a walking attachment wound, a walking trauma survivor without having either the language or the lens of understanding that.
So do you think that different Enneagram types exhibit distinct attachment patterns?
I think that there may be some patterns, but I do believe that every Enneagram number can have any attachment style. So 1 through 9, you can be avoidant, you can be anxious, you can be ambivalent, you can have a secure attachment. But, the narrative that comes with each one of those, like the 1 who says, I have to be right, or the 2, for me, it's I have to be liked, I have to be indispensable. And so just that narrative, it's like, whoa, let's unpack that story. Give me some scenes in your life. And, if you were to say, tell me your story, and by that you didn't mean give me the 30,000 foot, but give me 3 scenes from your life about that are related to that. And I would tell you about being 5 years old and going to the convent that I wrote about in the very first chapter of the book, where my aunt was a cloistered Carmelite. And I used to bring my trumpet, and I would stand on one side of the counter where the nuns were, and I would play my trumpet, and couldn't really play then. I never took lessons until 6th grade. And then I would tell jokes. And let's see, I was born in 64. I think Nixon left in 73. So I started doing Richard Nixon impressions when I was 9 years old. And I would go to the convent, and 17 nuns would come around and just light up, and they couldn't wait for little Mikey to do Nixon impressions. And then I started to do them in my neighborhood and at family gatherings. And I mean, it's pretty crazy to see anybody today, especially doing Richard Nixon impersonation, but a 9-year-old. And dude, I nailed it. And I got praised. I am not a crook. I am not a crook. Sister Henrietta, I am not a crook. So, what I learned there was, wow, I get attention, affection, affirmation. These people like me. And I went through my whole life becoming a smart aleck and memorizing jokes and reading joke books and watching comedy. And somebody could have just said, oh, that's an interest that he has. Like some boys put together models or play sports. But for me, it became survival.
Wow. So, I mentioned this the other day. Like, I've taken several attachment theory tests now. And every time it comes back, I come back as secure, which, you know my story. And so it's like, it always shocks me. I always think it's going to come back as disorganized because I look back to what I was like in my 20s and I think it was, and I don't know. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, unlike Enneagram numbers where you are that type for life, our attachment style is not fixed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I wrote about in the book toward the end, our hike in Aspen 3.5 years ago in August. And I shared with you as a friend about the fact that I was 60 pounds overweight and we were at about 9,000 feet elevation. And I won't tell the listeners, I'm sure you'll edit this out, but we were basically lost and we had no water. We had no water. The two things that you don't do in Colorado, and I've lived here for 34 years, we hiked in Aspen with no water and basically no directions. Hey, we'll find our way. And so we had this beautiful conversation. And as a result of that, I got accepted to an inpatient program for dealing with my eating disorder and food issues. That didn't turn out to work, but I went into a 12-step program and I lost a bunch of weight. I began to be transformed on the inside. And just like we can change our bodies, we can change our attachment styles for the good. And then there's things which will affect it for the bad. But let me say this, that I did blood work at the beginning of my weight loss. And my blood work was not really, really bad, like you're going to have a heart attack, but there were real concerns. And then afterwards, I had blood work and I had a physical, and my blood work reflected somebody that was much younger than I actually was. And I wasn't out of breath when the doctor asked me to take a breath, with the stethoscope. And then I was like wheezing. And I never saw how self-destructive I had become in my eating, albeit unintentional. And I'm only now realizing, with these issues still being something that I have to be attentive to and continue to do my work, I never realized how much joy and lightness of being there was on the other side of this. So just like blood work can change when we make behavioral changes in our life, we can have what many authors call earned secure attachment. I like to call it gained attachment, because there's something about, if secure attachment is I'm beloved and beheld and love has me, when you throw that word earned in there, it's like, oh no, I've got to do more performing and achieving in order to have this attachment. And it's exactly the opposite of that. It's something we gain through vulnerability, which comes as a result of trust.
So if, let's say, a person has anything but a secure attachment style, right? They're ambivalent, or they are, anxious or avoidant, whatever. Like, how do you make the journey from an insecure attachment to a secure attachment, specifically with God?
Well, I don't mean to be funny, but like, this would make a great semester-long seminary class, right? To ask that class, and that's what
we don't have that time, Michael.
That's what I do. That's what I do a lot of teaching on. So, some people move into a secure attachment and they get this healing and transformation where they go to God first, and they realize and they learn that God is a source of safety, and that they are seen there, and that there's comfort there, and that there's security, all the good stuff. But you actually have to have this lens, a way of seeing the story of God as it's communicated in the Judeo-Christian scriptures. And I think there's a lot of teaching out there right now which drives people to exhaustion, to perform, to have to be good enough. But very few good parents would say, I love my child and they're part of my family and I meet all their needs and I love to be present with them, because I think eventually they're going to get into an Ivy League school, or maybe make it to play a pro sport, and they'll be able to help me in my retirement, or they'll boost my ego and I'll tell all my friends. No good parent does that. So God is not interested in our performing or achieving. God is interested in the me that is me today. All of my flaws, all of my defects, all of my, quote, sin, brokenness, etc. And so we have to have a lens that is different from what we're often given. And also this idea that I'm bad. And I have a chapter in the book where I'm not broken, I'm not bad, I'm broken. So the first thing we have to do is to recognize that there's something there. And it really is a process of allowing ourselves, if it's between us and God, to position ourselves to be seen. And that often begins with people stepping into these classic spiritual practices of solitude, silence, and stillness, which you talk a lot about on this program and that we have spent a lot of time talking about. The reason why this is so important is stillness and silence take me out of performing. They take me out of a place where there's anything that I'm bringing to God that I think he would be impressed by. It's just me sitting, doing nothing. And in the centering prayer tradition, for example, the more I get distracted, the more opportunity I have to return to the space of being held and be held by this loving, benevolent, gracious God. And so it's a beautiful way. And I think that if I look back over the last 20 years of my life, beginning to practice silence and solitude, which goes absolutely in the face of my personality, my anxiety, my ADHD, it flies in the face of it. And it's been something that I've had to be relentless with. But I think there's been nothing that has paid off more as a practice. So that's one thing. And then to allow ourselves to be known by God, which is a paradoxical phrase, because presumably in God's omniscience, that he knows everything about me. But God wants me to know him knowing me, and that he's actually not mad, disappointed, frustrated, or disgusted when he knows the deepest parts of me, but that he delights. And in part because God is God, but also because God knows the source of my pain and the source of my sin. The original vulnerability that's there when we're all created, the original goodness which evil tries to destroy and to desecrate. And so it's a process that can happen. It's a process that between us and God, I believe this is why community is such an important part, and not to turn to just the subject of how do we develop it with our partners or on the human level, but I would go so far as saying that it's very, very, very difficult to develop a secure attachment with God if you don't have a secure attachment without being vulnerable and known by other people.
Go on.
Well, it's the beauty of the 12 steps, right? I went to a meeting this week where I've been in a vulnerable, struggling space with my recovery. And I did a share when it was my time for 2 minutes. And I think I put on my professor hat and I saw people start to take notes. And internally, while I'm talking, I'm going, wow, I'm giving them some good stuff. And I got to the end and I was like, I was just a poser. I made a little teeny tiny hint to the fact that I'm struggling. That was Saturday morning. And Saturday night, my beautiful bride of 34 years, she said to me, I'm really concerned. There's some areas where you seem kind of out of control with food. And my mind went to why on Saturday morning, when I know these people are the safest place that I know outside of the men's weekend that we say it's the safest place you'll ever know. Why did I put on my poser hat and come across as a professor? Now, my point is that had I let myself be known in my vulnerability and weakness on Saturday, it actually would have lifted a burden that I was carrying, that because I'm a 2, I thought I can carry that. I thought I'm here in this group and it's more important for me to be liked than it is to have my needs out on the table and to let other people love me and not like me. And I watched everybody else in the group do it with the other people, but I did not step into that. You know, James Baldwin says that love removes the masks that we don't think we can live without, which we also cannot live within. And so I'm very aware of my Enneagram 2 masks that I don't think I can live without. But I realized pretty quickly this time around, like, I can't live with it. I can't live within that mask because it's killing me. It's perpetuating the lie that I don't have needs and that I don't need other people. And I know that in my head and in my left brain, but my right brain and my nervous system is still figuring that out.
So what's in like a sentence, I'm going to make you do it in a sentence. Okay. What is the one big idea that you want everyone to walk away with after reading Sacred Attachment?
That the life that they imagine deep down in their heart that they could have with the divine, however they define that, that can happen through a life of surrendering to love.
How?
Over and over and over and over again.
So one last question, Mike, because I think this is interesting, because we have a lot of people on the show, different backgrounds, some like your own. In recent years, there's been this interesting emphasis being placed on integrating psychological insights and spirituality, right? So internal family systems would be one. We've talked about it here on the show. Attachment theory, which we've been discussing here. In many ways, the Enneagram of personality typing, right, is at one level is a psychological model, and so forth and so on. Is there ever a danger that we are therapeuticizing the gospel in any way, shape, or form?
Well, I think there's always a danger, of any modern perspective, philosophically, psychologically, being imposed upon historic Christian spirituality as the new correct version. There's that danger of my new awareness and discovery is the new right way to go. That
Right.
becomes another form of fundamentalism. Now, having said that, I have cringed in certain churches that I've been in where the pastor gets up and he says, we don't preach a therapeutic gospel here. We preach the gospel. And the word gospel means good news. And my question is, if the gospel is not therapeutic, what is it? When the founder of Christianity, Christ, said in his very first sermon, he announced that he came to bind up broken hearts and to enter into wounds and all that's unfavorable. And in that woundedness, to somehow allow us to become filled with light and love and to become who we're most meant to be. The words in the text are that I would make you oaks of righteousness to display my glory. What a picture of strength and fullness and maturity and wholeness that would actually bring light and love into the world. So I think it's fabulous. I've actually said on my podcast that that the neuroscientists, the attachment theorists, but ultimately the therapists that are sitting with men and women trying to help them, that they are the new prophets. And I remember reading Bono in 1994 in Rolling Stone magazine, and we were at a time politically where he said the new prophets are the comedians. And what he was saying was that the only people who are speaking in a way that can actually make people listen about all the contradictions in life and reality are the comedians. And I think the people that are doing that today are therapists. And certainly there can be an imbalance where it becomes all about us. But if it's not all about us, it will eventually become all about us. And I say that because in attachment theory, an infant doesn't produce anything. A 2-year-old doesn't produce anything. It's all inflow. It goes from the caregiver and the strength and the maturity toward the infant and the child, and it's all about them. A puppy. You love dogs. We have 2 dogs. Our neighbor came over yesterday with a new puppy, and he goes, I haven't slept in 5 days. So it's all about that dog. And if that dog or that infant doesn't get attended to where it's all about them, they will grow up with narcissistic wounds where it's all about them, or histrionic wounds where they're dramatic. And I could go through all the personality disorders or all the Enneagram numbers and say, that's why it's all about them. So it's so important to have balance. But I do think that there's a revolution happening where a lot of what is, quote, secular in psychology and neuroscience is opening up and expanding our understanding of spirituality so that we can actually embrace our humanity and allow spirituality to expand our humanity, as opposed to historically, so many traditions think that to grow spiritually is to become less human, to have less need, to suppress desire, to make my life smaller, as opposed to be fully alive, as Irenaeus said.
Wow. Fantastic, Michael. Such good stuff. All right. So obviously, Sacred Attachment. They go to Amazon, they go to your website, they go to Barnes & Noble, they go to Books A Million, blah, blah, blah. How do they get to you on socials?
Instagram, Michael J. Cusick, Restoring the Soul, and that's it.
Wonderful. And Restoring the Soul
restoringthesoul.com for our intensive programs. The men's weekend is Restoring the Soul Weekend, and then there's michaeljohncusick.com.
Wow, so many places. You could hardly get on Google and punch anything in without your name coming up, I'm sure. Anyway, Michael, this has been a hoot, man. I love spending time with you, and I never tire of hearing all the wisdom that you dispense so freely and graciously. And Anthony.
Yes, sir.
You just keep crying.
I will. Rich as always, Michael.
Anthony, thank you for your words earlier. It was wonderful to spend that week with you a couple of years back.
So good.
And thanks for having me on the program, Ian.
Oh, man. Are you kidding? Too good to be true. And listen up, everybody. You know how this ends. May you have love. May you have joy. May you have peace. May you have healing. And may you have rest. Until next time, friends.
Hey, friend. I know how it feels, waking up exhausted after multiple trips to the bathroom and feeling embarrassed by sudden leaks. I used to be constantly on edge, searching for a restroom whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Woman. I was skeptical at first, but 2 months in, everything changed. I experienced improved bladder control, no more heart-stopping moments when I laugh or sneeze, less urge to go, deeper and more restful sleep. I finally felt like myself again, confident and in control. Better Woman is natural, effective, and trusted by women for over 25 years. Ready to take back your control? Head over to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.